Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, is facing a high-stakes legal battle, and it's grabbing attention not only because of the charges against him, but also because of his bold legal strategy. Kanu is accused of terrorism and promoting separatism. But what's truly interesting right now is the challenge he's throwing at the very foundation of his trial. Kanu's defense team argues that the law under which he is being prosecuted doesn't even exist anymore. It was repealed in 2022, and yet he's being tried under it. Imagine that. You're being charged with something based on a law that was wiped out, according to the defense. If Kanu's team is right, then this trial is being conducted under unconstitutional grounds, and that could throw the entire process into question. Now, we know that Kanu is a controversial figure in Nigerian politics. He's been a key figure in the fight for the independence of Biafra, which was once a separate state before it was absorbed back into Nigeria after a brutal civil war in the late 1960s. The Biafran conflict still stirs emotions to this day, and Kanu's activism, calling for a sovereign state of Biafra, has made him a hero to many in the southeastern part of Nigeria. On the other hand, the Nigerian government views him as a threat to national security and has accused him of stirring violence and unrest in the region. He's already spent time in detention in both Nigeria and abroad, and his ongoing legal fight has been a headline in the country's political and legal circles. But the real twist here is the legal challenge he's brought forward. Kanu's defense is saying that the Terrorism, Prevention and Prohibition Act of 2022, which replaced the Terrorism, Prevention, Amendment Act of 2013, invalidates the charges against him. They are claiming that because the law that Kanu was charged under has been repealed, the court doesn't have the legal power to prosecute him anymore. They say the prosecution is baseless because the legal framework that initially supported the charges is no longer in effect. This is not just a technicality, it's a serious legal argument, one that could derail the entire case. Let's take a moment to understand why this is such a big deal. The law in question, the Terrorism, Prevention, Amendment Act of 2013, was repealed, replaced with a new law in 2022. This new law changed certain provisions, tightened the criteria for what constitutes terrorism, and updated how charges should be handled. Kanu's defense argues that under this new law, the charges against him should not stand. In their view, the case against him is legally invalid because it's based on an outdated statute. For those unfamiliar with the legal process, this is essentially saying that Kanu's trial is like someone being convicted for a crime under a law that no longer exists, making it a miscarriage of justice. Think about it. If the law has changed or been repealed, shouldn't the charges be dropped? That's the key argument here. The defense is essentially asking the court to acknowledge this legal flaw and dismiss the case, or at least stop it in its tracks. The prosecution, on the other hand, is not backing down. They argue that the law was still in place when Kanu allegedly committed the acts he's being charged for. They point out that even though the law was repealed in 2022, the previous law remained valid up until that time. So, in their view, Kanu can still be prosecuted under the law that was in effect at the time the alleged crimes took place. So, what's at stake here? A lot. If Kanu wins this legal argument, it could have major consequences for Nigeria's judicial system. A victory for Kanu would mean that his trial was legally flawed from the start, and that could set a huge precedent for other cases in the future. It would call into question the legitimacy of not only this trial, but others like it, where defendants are being prosecuted under laws that have since been repealed or replaced. But if the prosecution wins, it means that the courts will have reinforced the government's position and Kanu's trial will continue as planned. This could have major political consequences too. Kanu is not just a man on trial. He is a symbol of a larger movement. A movement that's been calling for the restoration of Biafra as an independent state. A win for the prosecution would likely strengthen the government's grip on the situation and potentially quell further uprisings or protests from IPOB supporters. Now let's take a look at the potential impacts beyond just this one case. If Kanu's challenge is upheld and the trial is thrown out, it would likely force the Nigerian legal system to rethink how it handles repealed laws in the future. It would send a message to lawmakers and judges that they need to be clear about the laws they create and enforce. In a country like Nigeria, where there are often debates about legal fairness, constitutional rights, and the power of the state, this case could have ripple effects across the entire legal system. On the other hand, if the court rules against Kanu, it would likely reinforce the government's position and could set a precedent that even if laws are repealed, the actions taken under those laws are still valid if the crimes were committed while the law was still in effect. This would give the government more power to enforce laws without fear that changes in legislation will invalidate their efforts. But let's take a step back and think about what this means for Nigeria as a country. The Kanu case is not just about one man, it's about the relationship between the government and its citizens, particularly the southeast region. The Igbos, who are the dominant ethnic group in the southeast, have long felt marginalized by the central government. This has led to calls for a separate Biafran state, something Kanu and many others strongly advocate for. So this trial is more than just a legal issue. It's deeply political. It's about the government asserting its control over a region that has long felt neglected. And it's about the people in that region pushing back against the government's authority. What we're seeing here is a battle between two very different visions for the future of Nigeria. On one side, there's a government that wants to maintain national unity and control. On the other side, there's a movement fighting for the right to self-determination, arguing that the current structure of the Nigerian state does not serve the interest of the people in the southeast. This case has the potential to escalate tensions in the region, no matter which way it goes. For those of us watching from outside the country, it's important to remember that legal systems are supposed to be a check on power, not a tool for it. Whether or not Kanu's legal challenge succeeds, it's a reminder of how important it is for laws to be fair and transparent. The law should not be used to target people based on their beliefs or political views. It should be used to protect the rights of every citizen. So, as the judgment date approaches, November 20th, 2025, all eyes are on the Nigerian courts. The outcome of this case could have lasting impacts on the country's legal system, its politics, and its people. It could either strengthen the government's control or spark further unrest. Either way, this trial is far from over, and it's clear that what happens next will be closely watched by Nigerians and the international community alike. Before I wrap up, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Do you believe Kanu's legal challenge is valid? Or do you think the government is right to push ahead with the charges? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest developments. This story is far from finished, and I'll be here to keep you informed as things unfold. Keep your eyes on this. It's a game changer. Thanks for watching.